All right, welcome to the stream, folks. We have something a little bit different here. This is Bad at Fighting Games presents a One Punch Combo, a fighting game podcast, episode 0. Introductions. As you can probably tell if you've been following the overall title branding that I use for my stuff, Bad at Fighting Games, that I've wanted to do this for a while. But there were a lot of questions I ended up having to ask myself about, but I do want to communicate both that those things that I was thinking about and what to expect from the series. I'm nearly always thinking of what to do and how to do it for the channel. I don't want to put in too much effort as it's something I do for fun, but at the same time, the comments I've gotten about people really appreciating what I bring to the table as well as considering what I can contribute that's unique to the sphere. That's sort of a balance there, but it's not an easy ask. I'm not really sure I can do anything unique. I do want to give some coverage to fighting games because they're not being covered as they should. Really, it seems like only Giant Bomb talks about fighting games outside of their initial release and actually seems to enjoy them. I've petitioned Kind of Funny to have more esports coverage and sort of waited, but there's been no progress there. We do have Coffee and Combos, which is a good podcast, but they're not regular. Unfortunately, it's of course, it's 2020 and coronavirus and everything, and I know a couple times the guys have been saying that they've been busy. I can imagine, some people are less busy because of coronavirus, some people are more busy because of coronavirus. But even in the process of putting together the first show, this is technically not the first show. This is just sort of an introduction thing, just so you can know to expect it and what to expect. Even the process of putting together the first show, which is going to be next Saturday, 10/3. We're probably going to be opening up the month. It'll be monthly. I think that's going to be a good pace for that to be at. But yeah, in the process of putting together a show, finding information on some of this stuff takes way too much effort. For instance, I was looking up Samurai Showdown, the DLC characters and when they're released, and this information isn't collected anywhere. The SNK in particular, at least for Samurai Showdown, I have not been following them. Beyond that, I'm more of a recent fan, but they've been doing YouTube videos and Japanese streams, but the problem is both of those things are Japanese. We don't have an official press release. I do believe they hired someone pretty recently, maybe within the last year, to sort of act as a community manager or someone who would talk to the public, etc., in the West. But, as far as it is, we have just, the DLC, they release it, they talk to the Japanese audience, and that's it. And of course, the hardcore people are there, but, I was just trying to find basic information. When were these DLC characters released? When is this character coming out? And, I had to search, and I ended up looking at the YouTube video, which I don't mind, but it really seems like this should be covered somewhere. But yeah, it's and ultimately we're lucky in fighting games, beyond the biggest, get coverage on shows like Giant Bomb and Kind of Funny, but especially if they're DLC, that we may not get that coverage. I know Kind of Funny does new dates, and it always, I die a little bit inside when we don't get our new dates for Samurai Showdown characters. But it is what it is. I do think doing this will be worthwhile. This isn't the only navigational issue that I've encountered in this situation. Another thing that was really big was some time ago, there was a lot of shilling for Capcom. I had to withdraw from many sources of news and entertainment that for some reason, they decided that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite had no faults, and they were not going to discuss it in a negative light or discuss it at all. It wasn't really right seeing these people praise Capcom when they were clearly in the wrong, and really, we're still seeing the aftershocks of that, with now Ono basically being forced to leave Capcom. But with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, with it having 2 feet in the grave, and basically everyone but Capcom moving the genre forward, I do think it's a good time to try and re-engage, and hopefully people are more honest. Even Maximilian Dude, a big fan of that, he's sort of recognized that the game is dead in the water and has been left for dead. Hopefully, we've really seen Capcom. They've sort of done the least of anybody in fighting games in the past couple years here. So they've withdrawn and they're being very conservative, and we're seeing an expansion in other places. But yeah, and then the other issue I sort of ran into was the community can sort of be a little rough. It's no real easy way to say that. There's a lot of wanting the community to expand and for fighting games to grow, but that seems all it is to be is wanting. They're just talking. They're not really walking the walk there. I sort of enjoyed starting fighting games. I started enjoying fighting games from a distance. Instead of engaging with the community, I pretty much just lurk and play matches now. That's all I do. And I still look forward to it, even if it's just going against randoms. On a more personal note, if you follow the channel, I've probably mentioned this, but I was searching for a job for about 6 months, so my backlog of fighting games increased ridiculously. I was trying to give myself the biggest advantage in fighting games, but really all games. I tend to go all in if at all possible. That's sort of my approach. But I have sort of this internal pressure that pushes me off of fighting games if I've missed anything. Meta can change overnight, and I really just end up thinking that I'll be left behind. So it all leads to sort of like this big bag of indecision for me. I think especially being in the streamer mindset, even when I'm not streaming, that it amplifies that greatly, which is part of the reason why I stopped streaming for about a 2-year period, I think that was. I do remember this podcast, I think it was the Game Informer show, where they were discussing how they studied on how that affects their game and its mechanics performed on streamers, particularly, pressures it created. I can't remember the name of the game or anything like that, but they were looking at this because when the people who were streaming the game, when they would play it, they would play it in a different way, or they would be pressured to act in a certain way. And ultimately, I think there's an aspect of that in what I end up doing. But that's sort of the little preamble, and that's why we're doing this show. But in terms of actual content, I think we're going to be doing mainly news. This should be a pretty short show, which is why I called it One Punch Combo. Fighting game news, pointing out upcoming events and tourneys and releases. That's some stuff we should be covering. Some things I won't really be covering is tourney results in detail. It seems, that would require actually watching tournaments, but I don't really find myself doing too much, unfortunately, but I've been working on sort of a secret project, and that's actually more successful than streaming, so it's I find myself drawn in multiple directions. Anyway, and looking at news, I think I'll have this show. I've said it at the top, but this show is probably going to be monthly. So the first show is going to be October 3rd, and I guess you can, you can definitely look forward to the show every month, starting the month, probably the first Saturday of the month. But yeah, as always, thanks for tuning in, folks. This makes the second show in the new lineup here. Says I have 2 viewers, but I don't see anybody in the chat log, so I don't know if you're just not logged in or whatever. But thanks for tuning in. But as always, what's going on there? I'm not sure. But yeah, as always, thanks for tuning in, and look forward to both Bad at Fighting Games productions, one being filler episode, the anime and manga podcast, premiering on Saturday evenings, and that's weekly. And we have One Punch Combo, the fighting game podcast, which will be on the first Saturday of the month, most likely. I think that's what's going to happen. And it's going to be monthly. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, folks.